Welcome to the Red Story, and just subscribe so I understand that everything is not in vain. Make some tea or coffee and listen to our new story. The Sweet Ache of a Midnight Smile. In the sleepy town of Folwell, where mornings smelled of freshly baked bread and the evenings hummed with the gentle clinks of dinner plates, there lived a woman named Eveline Skye. Eveline was 24, with eyes the color of emeralds, just kissed by the sun, and hair that cascaded in golden waves. Her life was a mosaic of quiet beauty, reading Paulo Coelho and Dostoevsky on misty afternoons, traveling to distant lands with her husband Jonathan, a dashing pilot with dreams as boundless as the skies he soared. Jonathan and Eveline had built a life that sparkled with comfort, with their two children laughing through the halls of their home. Yet there was a whisper of discontent in the corners of Eveline's mind, a soft murmur that she never quite acknowledged, even to herself. She had everything one could wish for, or so it seemed. It was during a particularly mundane afternoon, one that seemed destined to be lost in the folds of time, that Eveline met Dr. Alessandro Verdi. Alessandro was a 30-year-old dentist with a soul as deep as the Atlantic, a man whose Italian roots twisted and turned like ancient vines through his American life. He had a fondness for Ray Bradbury's Tales of Wonder and Hermann Hesse's philosophical musings, and he approached life with the same careful contemplation he used in crafting perfect smiles. Eveline's first appointment with Alessandro was supposed to be routine, a checkup, a cleaning, nothing more. But as soon as she stepped into the clinic, something shifted in the air, like the first note of a forgotten song. Alessandro noticed it too, though neither of them could quite put their finger on what it was. As he examined her teeth, their conversation flowed effortlessly, from books and travel to the meaning of life itself. It wasn't often that Alessandro encountered a patient who shared his love for literature, let alone one who could discuss Dostoevsky with such passion. Eveline, on the other hand, was struck by Alessandro's calm demeanor, the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world with a quiet grace. At the end of the appointment, Alessandro handed her a slip of paper with his personal phone number scribbled on it. For any emergencies, he said, though his eyes hinted at something more, something unspoken. Days turned into weeks, and the slip of paper lay forgotten in Eveline's handbag until one morning, when a dull ache woke her from her dreams. Her tooth throbbed with a persistent, gnawing pain that she couldn't ignore. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone and texted Alessandro. Its response was immediate. He could see her that evening, after his last appointment. As the day wore on, Eveline found herself growing more and more anxious, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. She dressed carefully that evening, choosing a soft, flowing dress that accentuated her delicate figure. She wasn't sure why she felt the need to look her best, but the thought of seeing Alessandro made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years. When she arrived at the clinic, Alessandro greeted her with a warm smile that sent a shiver down her spine. He noticed the bottle of French wine she carried and raised an eyebrow in surprise. "A gift," Eveline explained, her voice soft, "for taking such good care of me." The appointment stretched on longer than usual, but neither of them seemed to mind. They talked and laughed, sharing stories from their lives as Alessandro worked on her tooth. There was an ease between them that felt both natural and thrilling, as if they had known each other for years, rather than mere weeks. When the work was done and Alessandro sat back and looked at Eveline, his expression thoughtful. "Would you like to stay for a coffee?" he asked, his voice laced with something that felt like hope. "If you're not in a hurry, that is." Eveline hesitated, but only for a moment. "I'd like that," she said, and her smile lit up the room. They moved to the small kitchenette in the back of the clinic, where Alessandro brewed a pot of rich, dark coffee. The aroma filled the air, mixing with the quiet hum of the evening. They sat across from each other, their phones silenced, forgotten on the counter. The world outside the clinic's walls seemed to fade away as they lost themselves in conversation. Hours slipped by like sand through an hourglass, unnoticed and unimportant. They spoke of books and films, of dreams and disappointments. They shared their thoughts on love and life, on what it meant to be truly happy. Eveline found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years, and Alessandro listened with a quiet intensity that made her feel truly seen. As the night deepened, they found themselves on a park bench outside the clinic, each holding a cone of melting ice cream. Eveline couldn't stop smiling, and Alessandro's stories from his childhood in Italy made her laugh until her sides ached. There was something so effortless about being with him, something that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. When the clock struck midnight, Alessandro looked at Eveline with a question in his eyes. "What do you think, Eveline?" he asked, his voice soft. "Where do we go from here?" Eveline took a deep breath, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She knew the boundaries that lay between them, the lines they weren't supposed to cross. But in that moment, all she could think about was the way Alessandro made her feel, the connection they shared that felt too powerful to ignore. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe we just need to take it one step at a time. Like fixing a tooth, one small piece at a time." She pointed to the back of her mouth, to the tooth that still ached slightly. Alessandro nodded, understanding the unspoken words between them. "You're right," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "We need to be careful." They sat in silence for a while, the night air cool against their skin. Eveline's thoughts drifted to her husband, to the life they had built together. She cared for him deeply, but there was something missing, something she hadn't even realized she was searching for until she met Alessandro. Finally, Alessandro broke the silence. "I'll see you next week, Eveline," he said quietly, "and please don't be late." Eveline nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the unspoken. "I won't," she promised, standing up and smoothing down her dress. They walked back to the clinic in silence, the easy camaraderie of earlier replaced by something more serious, more uncertain. When they reached the door, Alessandro paused, looking at Eveline with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "Good night, Eveline," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Take care." "You too, Alessandro," she whispered, and with one last look, she turned and walked away. As Eveline walked through the quiet streets of Fogwell, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She knew that what had happened between her and Alessandro was more than just a casual conversation between a patient and her dentist. There was something deeper, something that had the potential to change everything. Back at home, Jonathan was already asleep, his breathing steady and calm. Eveline slipped into bed beside him, her mind still racing. She knew that she had crossed a line that night, one that she could never uncross. But as she lay there in the darkness, all she could think about was the way Alessandro had made her feel, alive, seen, understood. Eveline drifted off to sleep with thoughts of Alessandro swirling in her mind, knowing that the next week would bring even more difficult decisions. But for now, she would hold onto the memory of that night, of the connection they had shared, and let it guide her through the uncertainty ahead. In the days that followed, Eveline found herself thinking of Alessandro more and more. She replayed their conversations in her mind, the way his eyes had sparkled when he talked about his favorite books, the warmth of his smile when he had looked at her. She knew she was treading dangerous waters, but she couldn't help herself. There was something about Alessandro that drew her in, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When the day of her next appointment finally arrived, Eveline dressed with care, choosing an outfit that made her feel confident and beautiful. She told herself it was just another appointment, nothing more, but her heart raced with anticipation as she made her way to the clinic. Alessandro greeted her with the same warm smile that had been haunting her dreams. As they sat down to begin the appointment, Eveline felt the familiar rush of excitement, the thrill of being in his presence. Their conversation flowed as easily as before, but there was an undercurrent of tension this time, a shared understanding of the boundaries they were pushing. Eveline found herself wanting to reach out to touch his hand to see if the connection she felt was real, but she held back, afraid of what might happen if she crossed that line. When the appointment was over, Alessandro hesitated as if he had something more he wanted to say, but instead he simply smiled and told her to take care of herself. Eveline left the clinic with a heavy heart, knowing that she was playing with fire but unable to stop herself from getting burned. As the weeks went by, Eveline and Alessandro continued to see each other, their meetings becoming more frequent, more intimate. They shared more than just stories now. They shared secrets, dreams, and fears. Eveline found herself confiding in Alessandro in ways she had never done with anyone else, not even her husband. But as their connection grew stronger, so did the guilt that gnawed at Eveline's conscience. She knew she was betraying Jonathan, the man who had given her everything, but she couldn't bring herself to end things with Alessandro. There was something about him that she couldn't let go of, something that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. One night, after another late-night conversation that had stretched into the early hours of the morning, Eveline found herself on the brink of making a decision that could change everything. She stood outside the clinic, the cool night air brushing against her skin, and wondered if she was ready to take the next step, to see where this connection with Alessandro could lead. But before she could make up her mind, Alessandro stepped outside, his expression serious, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and regret. "Eveline," he said softly, "I think we need to talk." Eveline's heart pounded in her chest as she nodded, knowing that whatever Alessandro was about to say could change everything. She followed him back into the clinic, her mind racing with 1,000 possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. They sat down in his office, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Alessandro spoke, his voice trembling slightly as he struggled to find the right words. "I care about you, Eveline," he began, his eyes locked onto hers. "More than I should. But this, whatever this is between us, it's not right. I'm married, and you're married. We can't keep doing this." Eveline felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she forced herself to stay composed. She had known this moment was coming, had known that what they were doing couldn't last forever. But hearing Alessandro say the words out loud made it all too real. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know we can't keep doing this. But I don't want to lose you, Alessandro. Alessandro reached across the desk and took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. You won't lose me, Evelyn, he said softly. We'll always have what we shared, but we need to be strong now for ourselves and for our families. Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks now. She knew he was right, knew that they had to end things before they went too far. But the thought of losing him, of going back to her life without him, was almost too much to bear. They sat in silence for a long time, their hands still clasped together, both of them lost in their thoughts. Finally, Evelyn pulled her hand away and stood up, knowing that it was time to leave. Goodbye, Alessandro, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Thank you. For everything. Alessandro stood up and walked around the desk, pulling her into a tight embrace. Goodbye, Evelyn, he whispered into her hair. Take care of yourself. Evelyn nodded against his chest, savoring the warmth of his embrace one last time before pulling away. She turned and walked out of the clinic, not daring to look back, knowing that if she did, she might never be able to leave. As she walked through the quiet streets of Fogwell, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She knew she had made the right decision, but the pain of losing Alessandro was almost unbearable. She had found something in him that she hadn't even realized she was missing, and now that it was gone, she wasn't sure how to fill the void. But as she reached her front door, Evelyn took a deep breath and forced herself to focus on the present, on the life she had built with Jonathan and their children. She knew it would take time, but she was determined to move forward, to put the past behind her and find a way to be happy again. And as she lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, Evelyn knew that she would always carry a piece of Alessandro with her, a memory of what they had shared. But she also knew that she had made the right choice, the only choice she could have made. Life would go on, and so would she.